This story is about a human pilot who wakes up to find alien doctors removed his bladder, thinking it was a tumor. Jason's eyes fluttered open to the sterile blue sheen of the alien medbay ceiling. A texture like gelatin lit from behind. His throat felt like he'd swallowed sand. Limbs sluggish, spine aching. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He shifted and immediately realized he was soaked. Not just clammy from sweat-soaked, wet. Fully, shamefully wet. The kind of wet that made his brain leap to one horrifying conclusion before he'd even formed a coherent thought. Nurse. The nearest med drone turned toward him, a lizard-shaped automaton with flickering green sensors in a vaguely maternal tone. Subject Jason, you are conscious. Splendid. Surgical recovery is proceeding adequately. Do not exert yourself. Fluids are being replenished. I am soaked. Why am I soaked? His voice cracked as he tried to sit up. Pain bloomed across his lower abdomen like fireworks. You have urinated on yourself. Thrice since awakening protocols were initiated. Local med-servs have replaced linens. Do you require additional absorbents? Jason gawked. Wait, what do you mean? No, hang on. What surgery? Why did I even need surgery? The lizard drone chirped a few musical tones before speaking again. You were in for a routine scan following your return from Eltarn Moon 6. Advanced imaging revealed a rapidly growing mass within your lower abdominal cavity. Emergency consent protocols were activated. The surgical team successfully excised the anomaly. Anomaly? Jason blinked, a cold pit forming in his gut. You took something out of me? Correct. The neoplasm exhibited irregular cellular density and fluid retention. The diagnosis was clear. Where is it now? A fresh image projected beside him. It looked like a sad, deflated water balloon nestled in a pan. Congratulations. You are now tumor-free. Jason stared at the image for a long moment. Then he looked down at his own body, carefully propped on a gel pad, with several unfamiliar ports and a thin tube taped along his thigh. He had a very bad feeling. That's not a tumor, he croaked. The med drone hesitated. It was composed of organic tissue with considerable fluid storage capacity, showing, "That is my bladder," Jason shouted, then winced hard. "You took out my bladder." "Impossible," the drone replied calmly. No such structure was documented in standard human physiology files. That region was unassigned. Pathological growths commonly develop near the pelvic interface. You had no local anatomical labels for that object. Because it is standard issue on literally every human, Jason buried his face in his hands and let out a groan. You really didn't think to ask? There was no time. The anomaly exhibited signs of imminent rupture. Emergency protocols? Jason bolted upright with an adrenaline surge, then nearly passed out from the pain. You're telling me you saw my bladder and just yanked it out because you thought it looked weird? Yes, you are now safe from the threat it posed. He dropped back onto the bed, breathing hard. His brain was spiraling. Then where is the urine going now? We have installed an external conduit system. It processes flow through a pouch unit you may wear on your person. It will require regular changing every 70 minutes or less, depending on intake. Jason groaned again. This has to be a dream. This has to be a sleep paralysis nightmare where a metal gecko is telling me I pee into a bag now. The med drone chirped helpfully. You have not yet passed REM state. This is reality. A few hours later, after the head physician arrived, an 8-limbed symbiote named Kel, who smelled like stale mint. The story became even clearer and somehow worse. Yes, we are deeply apologetic for the confusion, Kel said, twisting its neck sac in what passed for concern. However, on closer analysis, your original bladder was dangerously malformed. There was an irregular wall, thickening, a weakened dome, and early signs of microtears. Jason blinked. You're saying it was about to burst? Precisely. Catastrophically. Within a matter of weeks, most likely. So you accidentally removed an organ I needed, but in doing so, you saved my life? Yes. An outcome both tragic and fortuitous. Your case is being published in 7 medical journals as a prime example of unintended surgical benefit. Oh, good, Jason muttered, staring at the ceiling again. Glad I could be famous for peeing into a bag. Hell flared 2 side limbs in delight. You are rapidly becoming a legend in xenomedicine. Over the next 3 days, Jason had to relearn basic bathroom protocols. He was not allowed to stand for more than 5 minutes at a time. Bending was out. Lifting anything heavier than a toothbrush required assistance. Every 6 minutes or so, his body expelled fluid, and he had to check the collection unit strapped to his thigh. It beeped when full, loudly. Dude, muttered Kav, his roommate and fellow pilot. You've turned into a walking kettle. Shut up. At least Kav was willing to help him get dressed. The worst was the briefing room. Jason had been cleared to attend in person by day 5. He lasted 13 minutes before the pouch filled mid-meeting and let out a high-pitched bloop like a dying duck. The room went silent. Admiral Brinks, a stone-faced Earthwoman with medals down to her knees, blinked once. Are you all right, Lieutenant? Jason gave a tight smile. Yes, ma'am, just some post-op plumbing issues. Kav raised a hand helpfully. He lost his bladder. Jason glared at him. You what? The Admiral asked. They thought it was a tumor. It's been a week. I pee like clockwork now. No one laughed, which somehow made it worse. You are hereby exempt from all infiltration or stealth assignments, Brinks said, returning to her notes. Thanks, Jason said. I'll just be in the corner, slowly hydrating. By day 10, the medical team had begun designing a custom internal prosthetic. But even with their advanced tech, it would take weeks to grow and integrate. Jason's body needed time to adjust. The nerve systems around his pelvic floor were bruised, tender, and stunned. He could not sense urgency anymore, only consequence. Kav, in a rare moment of solidarity, handed him a canteen during a long-range simulation and said, "Drink slow, it's a 4-hour sim." Jason sipped it like poison. That night, in his quarters, he received a message marked medical appointment. He opened it, expecting more drain statistics or a new catheter shape. Instead, it was a scan. His original bladder. Highlighted, annotated, with a note from Kel at the bottom. Review confirms. Rupture within 22 plus 6 Earth days was probable. Mast cell degradation underway. You may have experienced fatal failure mid-flight. Jason stared at it for a long time. He would have died. Mid-air. Just popped like a water balloon 30,000 feet up. No warning, no way to fix it. He was alive, now. Peeing loudly and publicly, yes, but alive. Still, the thought didn't make dinner dates easier. On day 12, he met a fellow officer in the cafeteria. Marla. Tall, bright smile, big on diplomatic ethics. She smiled and said she'd heard about his surgery. Oh, I'm glad you're doing better, she said, eyes warm. Jason opened his mouth to say thanks, and the pouch beeped. He froze. She blinked. A pause passed between them like a storm cloud. Is that your... Yes, he said. Yes, it is. She smiled awkwardly. Well, at least you'll never miss a pit stop again. Jason almost laughed. Almost. By week 3, Jason had memorized the hiss-click routine of swapping out his urine pouch in record time. His quarters resembled a medical aisle more than a living space, stocked with sterilized packs, backup adhesives, odor filters, and a tiny handheld scanner that Kel insisted he use preemptively before romantic encounter. Not that he was having any. Marla was polite when they crossed paths, so were most others. But now he noticed the pause, that little half-second glance toward his waist, the subtle shift in posture, like they weren't sure whether to shake his hand or offer condolences. The worst part was, he couldn't blame them. What kind of soldier leaks? Still, there was a war game simulation scheduled, and Jason was not about to miss it. Field recon on a cold world, 5 teams, no real weapons, but full mobility drills. He got clearance from medical reluctantly, and Kav offered to pack him a fresh supply bag. "You sure about this?" Kav asked, stuffing pouches into the insulated side pocket of Jason's vest. "We're not stopping for bathroom breaks." "I don't need bathroom breaks." That's the one upside now. Kav raised an eyebrow. "You'll freeze your bag off out there. Better than freezing my kidneys inside a lab." The shuttle down was rough, jostling through a thin atmosphere and sleet. Jason focused on the mission brief, but the words blurred. He'd been cleared for mild activity, not snow marches. Still, no way he was going to be stuck behind a desk while his bladder was used as a cautionary diagram. The terrain was brutal. Wind slicing sideways, patches of black ice, and ridge points that required crawling. Jason adjusted his vest constantly, conscious of the pouch sloshing beneath his uniform. Every step felt like a reminder. His breath misted in the visor. His right leg was a little sore from the mounting tape. He ignored it. At hour 2, the team split up to sweep the next zone. Jason and Kav ducked beneath a low ridge, checking sensors for simulated hostiles. "I think we're clear," Kav muttered, flipping a toggle on his scanner. "You okay?" Jason nodded. "Yeah, just cold." "Yeah, well, at least the pouch is insulated. Unless it freezes and you end up with a pea icicle. Thanks for the visual." Kav chuckled, just keeping morale high. They continued for another hour. Jason's movement was slower. His lower abdomen throbbed. Not pain exactly, but that dull buzz of exertion pressing against tissue that still wasn't ready. They set up a temporary shelter, and Jason used the privacy flap to change out the full bag. That's when it happened. He was zipping his kit closed when he felt it, a sudden, wet warmth down his leg. "No, no, no, no," he whispered. The adhesive on the port had slipped. By the time he sealed the leak, his right leg was soaked and his boot was squishing. Cold urine wicked into the lining. Kav poked his head in. "Dude, you... Oh, crap." "I need new pants," Jason muttered. Kav pulled back without comment. It was humiliating. The cold turned his skin raw. He sat in the half-shelter while Kav stood guard outside and changed silently into emergency gear. Back at base, the report filed him as compromised due to equipment failure. He knew what that meant. Not ready. A liability. Kel visited later that evening with fresh diagnostics. "You were not cleared for prolonged exertion in sub-zero temperatures," Kel said, adjusting the light near his bed. "The adhesive weakened due to sweat and lateral motion, expected in humans." "I had to try," Jason replied, voice low. "You are brave. Perhaps too much." Jason ran a hand over his face. "Is the prosthetic still on track?" "Yes. The bio-integrated reservoir is adapting. However, we cannot rush nerve interface bonding. You will likely require 4 more Earth weeks before we attempt installation." He nodded slowly. "What happens if the prosthetic doesn't take?" Kel hesitated. "Then we maintain external drainage long-term. Life quality will remain viable, career limitations may apply." Jason stared at the ceiling again. He had trained for deep ops. Stealth insertions, zero-grav extractions. None of those allowed for a sloshing fluid pouch that beeped every hour like a toddler's toy. He didn't want viable. He wanted normal. The next day, during a medical seminar for alien physicians, Jason was invited to speak. Kel claimed it would help. "It is important," Kel insisted. "They must understand." Jason stood in front of a dozen alien doctors and 2 human observers, wearing a standard uniform and a visible side pouch for demonstration. He clicked the holoscreen to show a cross-section of his lower abdomen, before and after. "This is my original bladder," he said, pointing. "You called it a tumor, but it's actually the human organ that stores urine." A green-scaled surgeon from Tolmec Prime raised a limb. "Why is it not segmented like most internal fluid structures?" "Because that's how humans work. One sac. It stretches." The room muttered softly. Jason continued. "You removed it. It wasn't your fault. You saw an irregularity. Truth is, it was about to fail anyway. So you saved my life. I know that. He paused. But now I live on a timer. Every hour, I stop being a person and start being a plumbing problem. There was silence. Then he added, "So label our organs better, please. I don't want anyone else to become a walking med lesson." The room nodded. Several took notes. One apologized. Jason left early. Later, in his room, Marla knocked. She carried a small packet of filters. "I brought the lavender-scented ones," she said, holding them up. "Figured you'd want options." He blinked. "I heard about the seminar and the simulation." Jason shrugged. "Bit of a wet performance." She grinned. "You're still here, that counts." They sat together for a while. She didn't ask questions, just kept him company. Jason found himself relaxing, even laughing a little. The pouch beeped once. He frowned. She leaned over and tapped it lightly. "Don't worry, I've dated worse." Jason chuckled. "That's not encouraging." "Relax," she said. "I meant emotionally worse. You're just medically interesting." He smiled, a little embarrassed. But it felt okay. As the night wore on, he actually forgot to check his fluid levels. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about leaking or pouches or alien surgical journals, just about being a person again, even if that person came with Velcro straps and auto-empty reminders. He could live with that, for now. Jason woke to the sound of the scanner chirping a soft green tone. Not an alarm, not a warning, just a quiet acknowledgement. His vitals were stable. No leakage during sleep, no unexpected spikes in fluid retention. A small win. He sat up slowly, stiff from the cold underside of the medbay cot. A familiar routine followed. Unstrap, clean, reapply, scan, log. The catheter port was healing well, though the skin surrounding it still bruised easily. He kept the area meticulously clean now, almost obsessively. Pride had turned to pragmatism. The faster he healed, the sooner they could try the implant. 4 more weeks had passed, 42 days since the surgery. The prosthetic bladder was ready. Kel and the surgical team had grown cautious since the original mishap. They now triple-verified every anatomical detail. For the implant procedure, they invited not only Earth-certified xenosurgeons, but 2 human urologists on loan from the Terran Medical Corps. Jason appreciated the gesture. He did not appreciate the prep. He lay on the sterile slab once again, listening to Kel explain the neural interface mechanism for the 5th time. Something about microtubule alignment and muscle signal harmonization. Jason only cared that he might finally be able to go to the bathroom, like a normal person again. "If all goes as planned," Kel finished, "you will regain partial voluntary control within 2 weeks. Full control may take months, depending on nerve response." Jason nodded. "And if it doesn't work?" "We will know within hours, but we are optimistic." He sighed and gave a thumbs up. "Let's do it." The procedure took 4 hours. They used a neural anesthesia patch instead of full sedation, allowing Jason to remain semi-conscious for real-time feedback. It was unsettling. He felt tugging and pressure, but no pain. The moment the synthetic bladder was seated into his pelvic floor, a wave of vertigo hit. "Strange sensation?" asked Dr. Petrov, the human urologist monitoring his vitals. "Feels like I swallowed a balloon that's judging me." The surgical assistant chuckled quietly. Kel did not. By the end of the procedure, the prosthetic had been grafted in, linked with surrounding muscle, and connected to Jason's urethral passage. A tiny nanofiber control array had been laid along his pelvic nerves to retrain his brain how to sense fullness again. They didn't call it a miracle, just a milestone. Recovery was slow. Jason wasn't allowed to stand for 3 days. The med team monitored his every twitch, every drop of fluid, every electrical signal from the implant. When he finally did take a few shaky steps to the hygiene station, he felt something he hadn't in 6 weeks. Pressure. The signal was faint and the sensation was weirdly high in his torso, but it was unmistakable. His body was telling him he needed to urinate. Not urgently, just enough to register. It felt incredible. He used the temporary valve system to activate the release manually. A button press, then a pause, a warm trickle. No beeping, no leakage, just relief. He almost cried. By the end of week 2, Jason could identify the need to urinate with about 70% accuracy. The prosthetic could hold roughly 2/3 of a normal human bladder's capacity, but it was expandable. A maintenance app on his datapad let him log trends and recalibrate thresholds. For once, he felt like his own body was talking back. Kav brought cupcakes on day 15. You peed the old-fashioned way this morning. Jason grinned. No bag, no beeps. Kav raised his hands dramatically. We're throwing a dry party. Even Marla showed up that evening, offering a smirk and a small plant. Bladders and begonias, she said, placing the pot on his desk, both require careful watering. Jason laughed harder than he had in days. Soon, light duty was reinstated. Jason wasn't cleared for flight ops yet, but he resumed training simulations and low-impact drills. His balance improved, the soreness in his abdomen faded. The implant warmed slightly during exercise, but otherwise behaved exactly like the real thing. Except better. Dr. Petrov reviewed the scan results with him at the 3-week mark. Your original bladder wasn't just malformed, he said, pointing to the 3D reconstruction. It was a time bomb. This ridge here, that's a congenital defect. The wall had thinned to under 2 millimeters. You wouldn't have made it through the next recon mission. Jason studied the scan. The inflamed dome. The early rupture lines. He'd always assumed he was just bad at holding it. Growing up, he chalked it up to nerves. He never questioned it, never had reason to. You're saying this thing saved me? Petrov nodded. The aliens shouldn't have taken it out, but they also shouldn't have left it in. Jason leaned back in his chair. For the first time, the twist felt less like a cosmic joke and more like a bizarre sort of grace. You've got one of the most sophisticated urogenital systems in the fleet now, Petrov added. Just don't run marathons or drink 4 liters of water at once. Noted. Still, returning to active duty was no guarantee. Admiral Brinks summoned him for an evaluation in person. He arrived early, uniform crisp, implant diagnostics preloaded on a wrist patch. She looked up from her desk as he entered. Lieutenant, I read the update. Ready for full service, ma'am. She folded her hands. I'm inclined to approve your reinstatement, but I want your assurance you can manage this in the field. There's no margin for unexpected malfunction. Jason met her gaze. The new system alerts me 45 minutes before full capacity. I've got a 5-minute override if needed. I can even silence all alerts for stealth missions and route feedback through tactile pulse. It's more reliable than my original. She studied him for a long moment. You understand the optics? Yes, ma'am. Your condition has become something of a teaching case across the Allied Medical Coalition. You're famous in ways most soldiers aren't. I'm aware. I'm hoping to become famous for other things, soon. Brinks cracked a smile. It was brief, but it happened. You're back on the rotation. Flight ops next month. Field exercise in 10 days. Dismissed. Jason nodded sharply, resisting the urge to grin like an idiot. The med team adjusted his training plan. He eased into full mobility, then impact drills. For the first time in months, he sprinted. The prosthetic didn't shift. No tug, no ache, just sweat, adrenaline, and freedom. He stopped mid-track and doubled over, laughing into the dirt. Kav trotted up behind him, panting. You okay? I ran and didn't leak. Kav wheezed. We're all very proud of your dry sprint. That night, Jason celebrated with real food, no hydration caps. He drank a beer, just one, and waited for the signal. It came gently, like a whisper. He stood, walked to the hygiene station, and took care of business without assistance. When he returned to his quarters, Marla was waiting. Walk went well? Flawless. Good, she said, because I booked us dinner next week, And I don't want to worry about surprise beeping. Jason tilted his head. You sure? I'm still technically synthetic down there. She leaned in. I don't date organs. I date people. Jason smiled. It felt natural again, like breathing. He wasn't just a medical story anymore. He was a man with a second chance, even if it came with a user manual. The launch bay was quieter than usual. Most of the crew was in orbit or asleep. Jason adjusted the seals on his flight suit and gave one last check to the neural sync module. Everything green. No malfunctions. His bladder implant had passed every trial with near-perfect marks. His final assessment flight was today. The run wasn't complex. An orbital relay loop around Carthus Prime with a simulated payload drop and return vector through a debris field. But it was high stakes. One sign of internal sensor lag or compromised mobility, and he'd be grounded again. Permanently. He double-checked the pressure readouts from the prosthetic. It had taken months of conditioning and neural reinforcement, but now it worked like second nature. He could tell when it filled, hold it without discomfort, and even override the valve in emergencies with a 2-finger press on the inner wrist pad. He flexed his fingers once, twice. No tremor. Just calm. Kel's voice came over the intercom. Vitals nominal, implant stable, muscle contractility at 96% of baseline. Lieutenant Jason, you are cleared for takeoff. Jason slid into the cockpit. Kav appeared on the side monitor, grinning. If your bladder explodes, I'm not cleaning it off the canopy. Appreciate the support. Try not to cry from joy out there. Only if I beat your flight record. Kav gave a mock salute and cut the feed. Jason eased the shuttle out of dock. The Carthus ring came into view, a glowing blue arc across space. Stars shimmered above it like broken glass. He could feel everything. The pressure of his legs against the seat, the subtle warmth of his lower abdomen, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. No pain, no cold tube, no leaking. Just flight. The drop went smoothly. Payload ejected, return vector plotted. Then halfway through the debris field, a fragment tagged his lower wing. Nothing critical, but enough to trip an alert. He had to perform a lateral roll and manual stabilization. This would be the test. High G turn, full abdominal engagement, quick reactions. Would the implant hold under sudden torsion? He rolled hard, gritting his teeth, muscles clenched, stomach compressed. No slosh, no beep, no warning ping, just a small pulse from the implant. A reminder, 30 minutes until full capacity. He laughed, heart pounding. He completed the run in record time. By the time the shuttle docked and the hatch opened, Brinks was already waiting in the hangar, arms folded. She looked at the flight log, then back at him. New record, minimal deviation, full system integrity. Jason pulled off his helmet. No surprise discharges. She raised an eyebrow. I hope that means what I think it means. He nodded. You're fully reinstated, she said, and extended her hand. Welcome back, Lieutenant. Jason shook it firm and steady. That evening, the crew hosted a small celebration in the rec bay. No speeches, just laughter, music, and terrible punch. Kav brought a cake shaped like a bladder. Someone added eyes and a tiny pilot helmet. Jason made a face, but laughed anyway. Midway through, Marla joined him near the viewport. So what now? She asked, sipping her drink. Active duty, long-haul recon, probably more paperwork than I ever wanted. She smiled. You're going to be a keynote at the Intergalactic Medical Symposium next month. Kel already submitted your story. Jason groaned. I'll be a walking diagram forever. Marla nudged him. A very alive diagram. He couldn't argue with that. Later, in the quiet of his room, he stood at the hygiene station out of habit. No urgency, no timer. But he went anyway, just to enjoy the sensation of choice. He looked at the implant diagnostics one more time. Solid, reliable. A year ago, he'd been a man with an invisible time bomb in his pelvis. A defect he never knew existed. A weakness that could have killed him mid-flight. The aliens had made a mistake, but somehow it had saved his life. Now he was stronger, not because of the synthetic organ, or the new title, or the attention, but because he'd adapted. He tapped the screen off and climbed into bed. No sensors beeped, no pouches tugged. Just silence and the hum of life around him. Jason closed his eyes, finally whole again.